Welcome back. Well, October is Fire Prevention Month, and in light of that, we are joined here at the Harris Nature Center by Meridian Township Fire Inspector Tavis Millerov. Tavis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So people will want to burn things since it is fall. Let's talk about, we have a fire pit set up here. Why don't we talk about some of the regulations with that?
Sure. There's two ways to obtain a burning permit in Meridian Township, and there are two types of those permits. The first one is the recreational fire pit or barbecue pit permit. You have behind us here a setup of actually much larger scale, being that this is the Nature Center, of a typical fire pit at your residence. Big thing to remember with the barbecue pit permits is that the only thing allowed to be burned in those is cut firewood. Pieces like this, not your logs typically you see after you cut down a tree or anything like that, but dried, seasoned, cut firewood is the best thing to burn in those. Now it is understandable that you will use some smaller things, such as small splinters like this for starting your fire or kindling your fire, but cut firewood is what we like to see. The reason behind that is if other materials are used, typically they produce a lot of smoke. Smoke in the neighborhoods tends to be a nuisance to a lot of different neighbors. We get a lot of calls. People get upset at each other in the neighborhoods for producing a lot of smoke, and we do have quite a bit of elderly population in the township that have breathing problems that are exacerbated by that smoke.
And as you mentioned, this fire pit is a lot larger scale than what most people would have on their property. But talk about like the possible length and depth that would be required for it to be safe. You
can find commercially available fire pit rings at a lot of your home improvement stores, Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's. You can also use a standard vehicle or tractor tire ring. We've seen people do that. Typically we don't like to see anything larger than 3 feet in diameter. And also we like to see a depth of about 8 to 12 inches dug out. Some people will just take an area, dig it out, and then line it with either brick or stone, rocks, and those are acceptable as well. And the reason why we don't like to see the depth too deep is actually because in order to get a good clean burning fire, you need to be able to have air that can entrain into it and then come up out through the center of it. By doing that, it'll create a nice flame effect without producing the obnoxious smoke that tends to make the neighbors upset.
And there is no cost to obtain one of these permits?
Absolutely not. The permit process was streamlined earlier this year. We do require for barbecue and recreational pits that they are renewed every year now. However, you can go to the township website under the fire department section. There you'll find a heading for burning permits, and then you can register your burn permit there online. If it's a renewal, all you have to do is register it. You're good for another year. If it's a new one, you just check a box saying that it's new, and we come out and inspect it and make sure everything is good to go.
And there is a second permit that we need to talk about here too, so why don't we head over to that real quick?
Sure.
So as you can see, we have a brush pile set up here. Why don't you talk about some of the regulations and how the process goes for obtaining this kind of permit?
This would be for a rural residential burn permit. These are the permits that are used for doing brush clearing as well as cleaning up your yard. You can also burn wetter materials, being the grass clippings and the leaves, although I don't recommend it. What this is used for, residents that have over an acre of land and are zoned rural residential can obtain these permits. These permits are issued on a daily basis, and in order to do that, they have to call the phone number to the station for burn permits, and the fire department has to come out and inspect it on a day-by-day basis to see what you're burning and where you're burning it at.
So talk about the process for getting that permit. Do people typically call the day of or the day before, or how does that work?
Typically, we prefer people to call the day of that they want to burn. It is somewhat difficult for us at times to be able to get out here just because we're answering other calls for service, whether medical or fire calls within the township during the same time. However, you call the day of, we'll have somebody come out and take a look and inspect it, make sure it's the proper type of fuel or wood that you're burning, and also make sure that the location and the size of the pile that you are burning is proper.
Meridian Township Fire Inspector Tavis Millerov. Tavis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And continuing with our Fire Safety Month topic, Home TV's Denise McMiller has some more fire safety tips.